Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, rulers, shows, desolators, spouses, vassals. I'm a useful idiot, and today I would like to talk about the militarization of the police. And of course, as usual, I want to look at the militarization of the police in a historical context so we can find out when and why this development has happened. And this is particularly relevant because I know there's a lot of discussions out there about when exactly the police state started, what is its nature, and what kind of factors have gone into it, including the cross-training with Israeli terrorist experts, which has been a huge trend, especially since 9/11. But of course, this trend towards the militarization of the police stretches much further back than 9/11, although it certainly has accelerated since that event. So what we have in this post-9/11 world is a huge move towards the militarization of the police, and this has been a global phenomenon. And that's why we see the fact that American police battling protesters in the streets don't look that much different than the ones we see battling austerity measures in Europe, as well as quelling protester violence in China. So this is definitely a global phenomenon. And so let's talk about the development of the police state, and we can trace it back to as early as 1980s. In fact, we can pinpoint a date as of 1981. So we have been seeing the development of the militarization of the police state for well over 30 years now. That will come as a surprise to many, including myself. And we can base this on the fact that there were hearings before the House Subcommittee on Crime in 2007, and an expert named Bradley Balco said this, and I quote, unquote, so just bear with me on this. This is a very important paragraph. Quote, "The militarization of the police is a troubling trend that's been on the rise in America's police departments over the last 25 years since the 1980s, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to acts passed by the U.S. Congress, millions of pieces of surplus military equipment have been given to local police departments across the country. We're not talking about computers and office equipment. Military-grade semi-automatic weapons, armored personnel carriers, tanks, helicopters, airplanes, and all manner of other equipment designed for use on the battlefield are now being used on American streets against American citizens. Academic criminologists credit these transfers with the dramatic rise in paramilitary SWAT teams over the last quarter century. SWAT teams were originally designed to be used in violent emergency situations like hostage takings, acts of terrorism, or bank robberies. From the 1960s to the 1980s, that's how they were used, and they performed marvelously. But beginning in the 1980s, they've been increasingly used for routine warrant service in drug cases and other nonviolent crimes. And thanks to the Pentagon transfer programs, there are now a lot more of them." Unquote. So this is an expert describing through the 80s how military-grade equipment is being transferred to police departments across the country. And this is where we can trace the development of the militarization of the police. Now, this decision to militarize the police obviously goes hand in hand with policy decisions that were being made at the top. And these policy decisions were not obvious, or at least so obvious at the time, as they certainly are now that we've seen the results of equipping police departments across the country with military-grade equipment and also giving them a military mandate. And we see more military tactics and a military militant attitude by the police forces in the United States. So these developments have gone hand in hand and have undoubtedly fed into each other. So what happened is Ronald Reagan in 1981 created the Military Cooperation with Law Enforcement Act. And this quickly passed a very cooperative Congress, circumventing the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878. And the military were encouraged to give any and all law enforcement agencies unfettered access to all military resources, training, and hardware included. And since 1994, most military surplus is donated free to police departments. And statistics show that in the 3 years after the 1994 law went into effect, 4,000 M16 assault rifles, 2,000 M14s, 73 grenade launchers, 112 armored personnel carriers, bayonets, tanks, helicopters, and airplanes, chemical agents, body armor, helmets, batons, tasers, have all been transferred to local police departments. So this trend was started in 1981, and by 1994, almost all of this material is given away free to police departments, or given through grants and or Department of Homeland Security subsidies. And of course, we see the police militarized on their own as the kind of hardware that your average policeman is able to carry has accelerated and militarized as well, and that includes chemical agents, body armor, helmets, batons, tasers, shotguns, revolvers, handcuffs, and surveillance technology. And this program started in 1994, was called the Department of Defense Excess Property Program. And what that's resulted in 2011 alone, 700,000 items were transferred from the U.S. military to law enforcement agencies across the United States, to police departments, for a total value of $500 million worth of equipment transferred to the police departments. In 2012, another $400 million. So we're looking at $400 to $500 million worth of equipment a year transferred from the U.S. military to police departments across the United States. Government grants to the police departments since 9/11 have totaled $34 billion. $34 billion transfer of military equipment from the United States military to police departments across the United States. And you put this hand in hand with the fact that we've had a huge amount of cross-training with Israeli anti-terrorism experts, both here in the United States. And a lot of police departments have sent officers over. In fact, over 700 officers have been sent to Israel to be trained in anti-terrorism. So this is another layer of how our police become militarized when they go to states like Israel and learn anti-terrorism techniques and then turn on our domestic American populations as if they are terrorists and inject that attitude about the average citizen being a belligerent. And in fact, in 2002, Boston and New York Police Department started training in Israel and even opened offices in Israel. So we have U.S. Police Department offices operating in Israel to continue this cross-pollination between the United States law enforcement agencies and anti-terrorist elements in Israel. And of course, we've seen a lot of history of this overpowering military technology by our police department in episodes daily now. And of course, larger episodes like the Ruby Ridge incident and the Waco incident. Two good examples of how military technology in police hands can go bad. They're not trained and ready for some technology, although anecdotes have shown that, of course, police officers love all their new toys. And that's another element of this, to me, is this mentality shift from public servants to the policemen that many people my age grew up with, to an era where you're raised on video games, an era when you're raised to be a badass, you're raised to be an anti-hero, like all the anti-heroes that people are raised on watching movies and television now. And we have a dominant amount of the police forces across the country now using steroids. So very interesting shift in the attitude of the police. So their mentality is also getting militarized, and they see an us and them struggle going on with the American citizens. I know over the last couple of years there's been a discussion about a war on police, which is ironic considering the body count that's rising from the oppression of the police against citizens. So I beg to differ. There is a police war on the American public. And Last but not least, we have a quote from Norm Stamper, former chief of Seattle, right here in my hometown. Former chief of Seattle Police Department who oversaw the city's response to the WTO protests. And he said, quote, "There's been an unmistakable trend towards more and more militarization of American law enforcement. Having local police departments go around with tanks and military equipment has a chilling effect on any effort to strengthen the relationship between the community and the police. And that's not the only danger. There's no justification for them having that type of equipment for one obvious reason, and that is if they have it, they will find a way to use it. And if they use it, they will misuse it altogether too many times." Of course, obvious example, we've seen the use of tasers being abused time and time and time again, as even all the most basic police equipment is abused from time and time and time and time again. And of course, they enjoy finding new ways to use all their new toys, and that's why we have SWAT teams appearing everywhere for regular, everyday crimes, and overwhelming force being used in the smallest of transgressions. So, anyway, so there we have a historical context for the militarization of the police in this country, phenomenon that everybody, I'm sure, has noticed by now. So now we have a timeline, a trajectory, a how and a why, and where we are headed. And a very disturbing trend in general, and one we see globally. So this is a concerted effort by the state to beef up their domestic security apparatus. And they need something at home, in spite of the fact that we have military forces. And I would proffer that states are now finding their armed forces less and less dependent on in a domestic civil unrest situation. So they are going to rely more and more on the police, and certainly integration with foreign departments as well. And that's another development in the militarization of the police that we've seen, is cross-fertilization with other police departments around the world, including Canada. So anyway, there you have it. We have the massive transfer of military equipment to our police departments, a whole change in the police department mandate and attitude, and then a cross-fertilization with the military intelligence elements and overseas military intelligence and police departments to create this stew that we have now in the United States. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.